Between Life and Death by Jaclyn. Bonus chapter. Vaughn's POV Chapter 5. I followed behind my little female as she maneuvered through the densely packed, chaotic crowd, working her way to the front. I kept enough distance between us that she didn't know she was being followed, but not too much that I might lose her in this mess of desperate pleas and angry shouting. Even during the cleansings, the village square had never been so full of people, of soldiers, which could only mean one thing: conscription. I had seen it before in different towns and cities, where the mortal king would demand a certain age group be taken to one of his many training camps. There, the young men would be treated no better than sewer rats, collared and starved, until they were feral, and willing to do whatever they were told if that's what it took for them to get a few measly crumpets in return. In the camps, higher-ranking soldiers would train the young men, and then send them off to fight the cursed. And there they would die, their souls snatched up by my ravens, and taken to the spirit realm. Their corpses would rot there, their lives lost due to a king that couldn't give two shits about his people. Centuries ago, it never would have bothered me. I was the keeper of the dead, after all. But that was before I met her. Speaking of, my eyes flicked up from underneath the shadow of my hood, looking to her. As I was immortal, I was genetically built to be larger than mortal males, and because I was taller than most, it wasn't hard to look over top of their heads and find my white-haired female. I was quite fond of the unique color of her hair. It made it so easy to track her down, in this life, and the last. A smirk curved my lips, but it was quickly ironed out when I saw her shoulders drop, and then I felt her emotions screaming at me through the bond. Her anguish gutted me where I stood, like a knife to my stomach, slitting me wide open. Something was wrong. Jerking my gaze from her, I looked ahead. A low, frustrated growl rumbled out from the depths of my chest when I saw the culprit of her heartbreak. Her brother Caleb was standing amongst 40-some other men, his head dipped down, shoulders slumped in defeat. He was among those being conscripted. She screamed his name, and it was like a shot of adrenaline shooting straight through my bloodless veins, putting every fiber of my being on high alert. It was like a reflex, my muscles tensing and screaming at me to do something to comfort her, to protect her. That is how it was with the bond. When our mates were in distress, it forced our animalistic ways to surface. I gritted my teeth and kept myself planted where I was, fighting that incessant, aggressive command that told me to go to her. Creator above, it was hard not to give in. A man, wearing a ridiculous wig that looked like he had shaved off a sheep's coat and piled it on his head, began to read aloud from a scroll he had stretched out before him. He blabbered on about the enactment of conscription, but his voice was lost to me because all I could think of was Sage. When he finished, the crowd's desperation grew to astronomical proportions. The shouting and pushing picked up as the crowd tried to demand their sons back, knowing full well what would happen when the soldiers took them. Sage cried out again, her voice her panic, like a casting of a spell, summoning me to go to her. Again, I had to fight that damn instinct, forging lead into my feet. I didn't go to her because I made her a promise, and I intended to keep it for as long as I could. And the moment I inserted myself in her life, that was when I would break it. But considering the circumstances, my hand might be forced. I shifted my gaze from her, looking back to Caleb. He mouthed a word, one single word: please. I could feel Sage's heart break. His hand shook as he raised it to his heart, tapping the spot twice, conveying some secret message to her. Although I didn't understand the hand signals, the message was clear, and Caleb was asking Sage not to do anything. She shook her head, unwilling to accept. Then she twisted around, looking at the crowd for help, but finding none. I should have ducked or turned away, but I didn't in that moment, because I was a weak bastard. Somehow, she did not see me, her pleading gaze scanning right on past me. Before she turned back around, I caught the expression on her face, the one that told me all I needed to know: Sage was going to fight. Sure enough, her head snapped towards a soldier. I grumbled. I could intervene. I could crush the soldier's armor like a tin can, their bones too. I could rescue Caleb and the other men. But there would be consequences if I did, and they would be delivered by two very powerful immortals, ones whom I knew not to trifle with, the goddess of fate and the goddess of destiny. The sisters would have weaved this day into existence many years ago, and they would be none too pleased if I stepped in and altered things, which meant I needed to proceed with caution. When Sage dropped into a warrior's stance, arms tucked to her sides as she summoned her power, I was forced to make a decision, one that would respect the two goddesses, while also protecting Sage. And so, I did what any rational male would do for the female he loved. I cut off her oxygen, she sputtered, her hands clawing at her throat as if she were trying to open it back up so she could breathe again. She dropped to her knees, holding out as long as she could, until she could hold on to her consciousness no longer. Before her head struck the cobblestones, I caught her. My arms swept under the back of her legs, and I hoisted her against my chest, carrying her bridal style. It was fitting, considering that is what she was going to be someday. She had made a deal with me, centuries ago, agreeing to be my bride. Although she never upheld her side of the bargain in her last life, it was one I would ensure she kept in this one. Caleb's wide, disbelieving eyes were the last thing I saw before my shadows slithered around us. I offered him a wink, and then shadow walked my future queen to the grungy, piss-poor excuse of a city known as Norwood. With one knee propped on the rickety bed, gently I laid her down in the middle of it. When she woke in this small, unfamiliar room, full of cheap, unfamiliar furniture, she would be startled and afraid, and I didn't want her to fall off the bed in her disorientation and hurt herself. I realized my actions contradicted what I had just done to her, but I was a complicated bastard. A ribbon of snow-kissed hair tumbled rare top of her face. Careful not to wake her, gently, I tucked it back, leaning over top of her. My breath faltered. Creator above, she was perfect. Her almond-shaped eyes and slightly upturned nose were set in moonlit skin. Her delicate, luxurious skin was so soft, it would be so easy to corrupt and stain with my touch. My fingers drifted across her cheek, brushing across her bottom lip. Her mouth parted slightly. I stifled a groan. Absolutely fucking perfect. Men hungered for wealth or power or position. But not me. There was only one thing I craved, and I was looking right at her. Her tight-fitted tunic and pants did little to conceal the wealth of woman lingering beneath. My gaze slid down her body, her incredible peaks and curves, taking in her leanly muscled torso and curvaceous bottom, as juicy as a ripe apple begging to be bit into. An image of her, naked and panting as I fisted her hair and took her from behind, emerged on the forefront of my mind. My shadows swept around her ankles, keeping her legs parted as I carved my name into her husky moans. I forced an exhale through my nose, my body growing rigid and tense, filled with primal need. I cracked my neck, but it didn't help. Nothing ever helped. Sunlight shone through the window, spilling across the bed as if it were reaching for her. I bit back a territorial snarl. The sun could keep its damned golden fingers to itself. One look at the window drapes had the thick fabric slapping shut, cutting off the sunlight and bathing the room in darkness. A befitting environment. Elle glanced back to Sage for the daughter of the moon. Sweet dreams, kitten, I whispered as I stood up. I reached for the light throw blanket at the end of the bed and drew it over top of her. I had given her all the time I could in this lifetime. Time away from me, away from our twisted history. But now that I had felt that addictive feeling of what it was like to hold her in my arms again, I knew one thing with every fiber of my immortal being. I would never let her go. Not now. Not ever. Considering I had knocked Sage out and brought her here, I figured the least I could do was make her a meal. So, I went down into the basement's cold room, selected an armful of different foods, and returned upstairs to the kitchen. I dropped the ingredients on the countertop and began to search for a cutting board and a knife. Congratulations, purred a familiar, prickish voice from behind me. You finally got your mate back. Not yet, I corrected, pausing my search. I turned to face him, eyeing up the bottle of bourbon in his hand before shifting my gaze to his face. He wore the twin to my own, the pierced, scarred version. But I will. He extended a long, tattooed arm, offering me the bottle. Of that I have no doubt, brother.